Speakcies.
They say necessity is the mother of invention. So I'm going to take advantage of our current time as an opportunity to start wearing ascots.
Welcome to Origin of Speakcies. My name is Scott, and I'm here looking at the beautiful face of my friend Steve on a laptop. Hey, man.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. And you know, I can see you as an ascot guy.
Yeah.
Makes total sense to me. Now, what made you decide this?
Well, I know it with our current time. Cloth masks. You're in public, you got to have some sort of mask. So trying to think of a way I could do it and be fashionable. And my thought is, if I have an ascot, I can maybe, have it draped over my mouth when necessary. And then when I'm not wearing it, I look like I've just got out of the mystery machine and solved. Figured out it was Old Man Clemens the whole time.
That's right. If it weren't for you pesky kids, I would have gotten away with it too.
Yeah.
So with the ascot, the first person that I pictured was the guy from Ace Ventura 2 who, is at the beginning of the movie. Not one of the more celebrated Jim Carrey movies, but I forgot about the guy from Scooby-Doo, of course.
I think him. I'm trying to think of other like ascot wearers. There's Charles Nelson Riley.
Oh yeah, from
various 70s TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
There's Alec Baldwin playing Charles Nelson Riley on Saturday Night Live, which is good. And semi-related, you and I have been looking for a way to talk about this picture of Alec Baldwin that I will put on there. He's not wearing an ascot, but he's wearing like a bandana in an ascotish way, I guess. But
yeah, I will say, you can find this. Where can we find this, Steve?
Probably on Speaksie at Speaksies on Instagram and Speaksies Twitter on Twitter.
Not to mention both Steve and my phone, because I definitely did get a text with that picture in it, and we both decided it was going to need to be discussed and brought up. And
it is.
I actually I've showed other people that picture, by the way, and I'm going to be honest. I think I was the more excited person. I don't know that the other person really got the majesty of it, but anyway, you have to go check this out.
Yeah, maybe this is this is a time to explore other parts of ourselves or something. I don't know. But for right now, I'm just going to focus on just having an ascot potentially. Now, of course, I have to be in a situation to actually leave the house and go anywhere. Whereas currently, I wear if I have to go out and get something, I wear my good sweatshirt, my good hoodie, not any of just my lower class hoodies that are lying around, the best hoodie that I have. And my lovely wife has pointed out that I am walking outside in shorts with my socks up very high quite often and not really caring what other people think. And that is correct.
The world is catching up to me. That's what's happening right now, because I started this well before the quarantine. I was doing things like socks and sandals and sweatpants out of the house. And so I'm pretty much just living my life.
But I hope maybe, too, that'll be a way to kind of balance out things, that when people are still figuring out how to function in life without wearing flannel pants, that I can have an ascot and kind of, pull the lever the other way.
You're thinking ahead. I mean, you're going to leave this when this thing is all over. Most people are, like you said, are going to have really taken their wardrobe down a few notches. Yeah. You're going to be prepared with an ascot. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone in person in an ascot, but I look forward to.
Yeah. Well, the downside of the ascot is what I found out, though, is that when you put it on, you can't pull it up, though, as a mask.
Not yet.
I'll show you why I know that.
Please do. Oh. You're wearing an ascot right now. That's amazing.
So.
Wow. That was impressive. So for those of you that aren't on this current Skype call right now, Steve just took his sweatshirt off and to reveal a nice dress shirt. And what is that, a navy blue ascot?
It is a navy blue ascot.
It looks very smart, or like something your mom would say. It's very you look very sharp right now, very handsome.
So I put this on a couple hours ago, and once I got the knot tied, I didn't want to undo it. So Ascot Steve has been roaming the house looking like his martini glass has been empty for the last few hours, which I'll take care of after this.
The best part of that is that we were supposed to start like 20 or 30 minutes ago, and I asked Steve, can we start a little late today? That he's
Ascot Steve was fine with it. I looked good, and I was comfortable at the same time.
I like it. Well, now you're really making me want to release this as a video podcast, but of course I haven't dressed up, but that looks really good.
Thank you.
Well, I like where your head's at, Steve. And I know that I, like you, have been working from home. And tonight we're going to do some idioms that have to do with, hard work. So
hard work.
A lot of us are doing hard work. Some people are out of work right now, and they're looking forward to getting back and doing hard work.
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to do is put your nose to the grindstone.
Nose to the grindstone.
When I was a kid, I didn't know what a grindstone was. And I actually got it confused with rhinestone, like a rhinestone cowboy.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And I was like, nose to the rhinestone? Like, when you're a kid and things just get so muddy, it doesn't make sense. Now, if I heard this as an adult, I still wouldn't know what a grindstone was. Right. But I know what a rhinestone was and have an idea that it was something completely different. So put your nose to the grindstone. What's your relationship with this one?
So that's one I've heard a lot. I wouldn't surprise me if I've used it. And I feel like when you say that, people know what you mean. You're working hard. You're getting down and dirty with the work that you're doing. It's also one of those idioms that if you think about it for a minute, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because if it's a grindstone, something that you're grinding with, it doesn't seem like putting your nose to it is going to be very productive for long. It just
right. Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And I'm kind of like, do you know what it means now? Like, do you know the origin of this one?
I don't.
Okay, cool. Because once we go through this and you get to the origin of it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, it seems. And again, I think it's one that if you were an adult and you heard it, maybe you'd get it, but it's just, you sort of get these other ideas of what it could mean. So let's talk about this. And we're going to use, of course, our good friends that hopefully we'll meet one day at phrases.org. .uk. So there are a couple of possible explanations for this one. This is sort of the well, let me just tell you what they are first, and then I'll give you some more thoughts on it. So the first one is that it comes from millers who use grindstones in a mill to grind oats and wheat into cereal. And in order for them to
make craft IPAs,
it would work for that too, right?
Okay.
Ye old craft IPAs, right?
Ascot Steve wouldn't have one. He'd have probably something with vermouth in it. But please continue.
Well, actually, no. Let's talk about vermouth for a second. I know we're getting off. I love vermouth. I just had this conversation with somebody about how vermouth is underrated. If you ever had a good vermouth, and wearing that ascot, our good friend Micah Lamont did a vermouth tasting back, I don't know, a year or two ago. And in some places like Portugal, they drink it out of taps. Anyway, so but you look like a vermouth guy. But anyway, millers would grind using these grindstones. And the way they were so good at their craft, the way that they would know whether or not they had grinded or ground it too much, I guess, is that they'd be able to smell the burning of the wheat or whatever it was they were grinding. And that was why they would have their nose to the grindstone. So for me to kind of do some research on this, I felt like I needed to understand a little bit better. I don't like what a mill actually was. I mean, again, one of those things you hear like in a Bruce Springsteen song, the mill closed and everybody lost their job. I don't know that I really understood what a mill was. So did a little research and basically, a mill, essentially going way back to when this idiom started, is just a place where you would use these things called millstones, which are like these huge, almost look like wheels, and they're made out of really good rock that you wouldn't get usually you didn't have it in town. They were like, you'd have to get them brought in from somewhere else. So getting these grindstones is like a really big deal. And so there are a lot of, and so that would pretty much would employ a town. Everybody would work at the mill and they'd have their, whatever it was they were making. And so it became a place where a lot of different idioms over the years and proverbs and sayings came from. So for example, hearing the phrase to have a millstone around one's neck, you know, it's sort of like saying you have an albatross or something, but it's something that's weighing you down.
Right. And it sounds like something that's not very easy to get off. You're not just going to kind of flick that millstone off your neck. It's going to hold you down. It's going to take you down and hold you down.
That's exactly it. Yep. It's more so than just kind of a pain in the butt. It's just something that you can't shake. So people might use that as a hardship in your life, or maybe a person that you can't shake. Going through the mill, you heard, you know, and I use that one all the time. Because usually what I say is something like, oh man, I feel like I've been put through the mill, you know?
Yeah.
And so that comes from it as well. And we aren't going to go into all these, of course. The other one being, like there's a proverb, all is grist for the mill. I've heard that one, but never really understood what it meant. But it essentially just means it's a proverb saying everything can be essentially made useful or be made of profit. So, you know, when in doubt, let's throw it in the mill, grind it up, see what happens and sell it. Yep. So millstones, grindstones. So when you hear all of this, you know, you can kind of understand where nose to the grindstone makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of satisfying.
Right.
So Michael Quinion at Worldwide Words actually has an article titled "The Miller's Tale," which is an allusion to the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer, and that's where I got all this information about all of the previous idioms and proverbs I said. But he had actually gone to a mill in California. It's a historic preserved grist mill. And believe it or not, the guide is the one who told him about this and told him that the explanation for keeping your nose to the grindstone was about the miller. And of course, it was one of the most prized possessions of the miller were the pair of grindstones, which is true. And then he goes on for this long description, which we won't get into. But anyway, I just like the fact that the guide tells all this story, and then he says, and that's where they got the phrase "keep your nose to the grindstone," because he wanted to make sure that the cereal, he says cereal, but whatever it was, wasn't burning.
Okay.
And if I've learned anything from this podcast, if a guide at a place like that tells you where an idiom came from, you can go ahead and
wrong.
It's gonna be wrong. It is wrong. So as Michael says, the trouble with this explanation, plausible though it sounds, is it just doesn't fit the evidence. And once again, I mean, this goes back all the way to much, much prior to when they had these types of grindstones or millstones that he's talking about. So it's not having anything to do with the mill. I don't know, Steve, are you familiar with mills at all? I mean, am I the only one that grew up hearing about mills but not knowing what they were?
So it's interesting you brought this up because I don't think we talked about what we were going to discuss tonight. So my father's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I think I get the impression of everyone his age at some point, including himself, worked at a steel mill, which is a little bit more exciting, I think, and dangerous than, not to say getting crushed underneath, millstones is a good way to go either. But the potential for being liquefied by steel, falling into being exposed to like distilled metal.
Yeah,
it's a high probability.
And now that you mentioned that, Springsteen was probably singing about steel mills and not, oatmeal mills or whatever the hell the the Canterbury Tales.
He's getting to that age, and I'm not going to judge anyone who likes oatmeal, but maybe that's like how he transitions into like his Quaker Oats ads in the next few years.
I could see it. Yeah. So I was going to go into a big Bruce Springsteen. Are you, we've never talked about that. Are you a Springsteen fan?
I am not. I think I'm probably best described as agnostic on Bruce Springsteen. And I know plenty of people that are probably, for one, furious that I said that out loud. Two will tell me, well, you haven't seen him in concert, which is true. I haven't. And I hear that's like the religious experience you need to have. And I will accordingly put him on my list of people that I kind of wish I had seen a few years ago, because now at the age he's at, and certain members of his band have passed away.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be good. And especially now as I wear an ascot, I think it would be kind of tough. But I imagine at the ticket prices that he charges now, maybe Ascot Steve would be a good fit for that. But I will say I'm kind of weird with Bruce Springsteen in that the couple albums I do like by him, and he's somebody, again, he's not like he's bad. I just doesn't do it for me. I'm actually a pretty big fan of his album Nebraska, which is a very un-Bruce Springsteen album. It almost sounds like a demo. I think actually it was recorded as a demo, just like him on a 4-track. So very stripped down, pretty depressing. And probably my favorite Bruce Springsteen song, other than Glory Days, which inspired my favorite restaurant. You don't? I saw the cringe, the video cringe.
The song I don't like, but the place is good.
Yeah. The River, which is maybe the most depressing song that's ever been written. So if anyone's ever feeling bad and feeling really down and you want to see how far you can push yourself, listen to The River from the album The River, I believe. The song The River by Bruce Springsteen.
Does a mill close down? I bet it does.
I think it closes down and falls on somebody. Actually, I think a mill does close. I'm not joking. I think a mill does close in the song.
We're gonna fact check that, but that would be again. We didn't discuss this ahead of time, but that's just what we call serendipity once again, if that's true. Yeah. So that's right. Your dad is from Pittsburgh and a big Steelers fan. I know he likes the Pirates as well. I remember talking baseball with him back in the day a little bit, but so when you say a mill, it just can be, all sorts of things get milled. All is grist for the mill, as it were. So we're going to move on to, so it's really shouldn't be that. And the reason why is because, as Michael Quinion says, simply the evidence isn't there. And this phrase goes way before that. So I'm going to switch gears and before we wrap this one up, and I have a good Quora guy one, and bear with me on this Quora guy. I know these can seem tedious, but this one will pay off a little bit for you. Okay. So, this is Quora guy on, hey, where did we get the phrase, put your nose to the grindstone? He says, and by the way, see if you can pick up any of these, like, things that we always hear.
Okay.
Back in the golden era that some wish to return to before all this technology stuff took over. Yeah. And everyone was happy.
That's right. Because when people lived to the age of 33 as a great grandparent before they died, their life was good.
That's right. Well, I'm not going to bring up plague. Yeah. Knives and tools were sharpened on a grinding wheel or, quote, grindstone that was operated by a foot treadle. These things were massive and heavy, slightly more than 2 feet in diameter. In order to keep it spinning, the person doing the sharpening had to sit in front of it with his, and then in parentheses it says, with his, almost never her, like, thanks. When they editorial, like, what? Yeah. With his, almost never her, legs straddling it and pumping the treadle. In this position, when sharpening a blade, the sharpener's nose was in a position a few inches above the grindstone. If he didn't have, quote, his nose to the grindstone, unquote, which that's always good too, when they wrap it up to like put it in context. If he didn't have his, quote, nose to the grindstone, unquote, he was just sitting there, not working. True fact.
Oh,
that's the payoff.
I need to talk to my friend Mr. Banquette about that to see if he look in the family records and dispute that. Core guy, gotta love him. And I will say the best way, the way I got through that is I imagine Alec Baldwin in that outfit, reading that as he graphically described the thrusting on the trundle or whatever.
Well, you could think about him with his nose to the grindstone, sharpening a blade. So here's where the plot twist on this one is, Quora guy's basically right on this. Like it really does have to do more with just sharpening a blade. So obviously it's hilarious whenever they drop in the back in the golden age before it's like, oh, here we go.
Life was good.
Aunt Peggy, when quote, everyone was happy. It's like, okay. That might be my favorite one since the one where it was like, what did they say? Like back in antiquity in the 16, or whatever it was in the 1400s when George Washington was president or whatever it was. Right. And you're like, they're just messing with us now. But so let's wrap it up with back to Worldwide Words. He says that this started with a proverb. So back from 1532, John Frith. It's hard to say possessive when somebody's name ends in th. John Frith's you're right.
Frith's.
Yeah, John Frith's
Viscount.
Right. From John Frith's A Mirror to Know Thyself of 1532, the quote is, "They holdeth their noses so hard to the grindstone that it clean disfigureth their faces." And in the context, they're clearly sharpening their tools, has nothing to do with a miller's trade. And there are many subsequent citations that confirm this. So yeah, so having your nose to the grindstone really does kind of mean you're sharpening whatever tools you're using. Maybe you're using one of those foot, treadle things, if I'm saying that right, to sharpen it, or you're just down kind of with a rock and sharpening your tool. So this one is satisfying to me. I now have a visual for this other than like some guy laying down with his nose on a stone or something, or a rhinestone.
I think since you said sharpening his tool with a rock, that'll give me another visual to kind of always remember this. And by the way, I looked up as we were speaking. Nose to the Rhinestone is a drag show that's currently playing in Dallas, Texas. So,
all right. Well, once we get out of this quarantine.
Yeah, we know we have something else to do now.
Okay, so the next one we're going to do is another one that has to do with hard work, but it's a little different, and it's elbow grease.
Elbow grease.
Yep. So I thought this was an interesting one because it's one, again, that you kind of, what it means. You get the visual of it, kind of. But I just always think of it as literally as like using turning a wrench or something, or opening a jar, and you really got to use elbow grease. You're somehow literally using, you're getting the most out of your elbow.
Right.
But it really just means, hey, get in there and give it your all, work hard. I mean, what about you? What do you think about this one?
That's one I use all the time. I think a little bit like the last one. This one probably even makes less sense of when you would, because at least with it, you could see your nose being near a grindstone, maybe if you were pushing hard on it. Yeah. But theoretically, I don't think there is such a thing as elbow grease, but know what it means, uses it a lot. And I think it's very similar nose to the grindstone, and it is kind of tells you there's going to be hard work. You're not getting through this easily. You're going to have to man up and work hard, or pardon me, #diversity, woman up also, and just get in there and do what you got to do, force things to get them done.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what got me thinking about this one, because with nose to the grindstone, I was just kind of thinking, I feel like we've got a few of these, and one of them is elbow grease. I have no idea what it means, so let me look it up. So from Grammar Girl, she states that it goes all the way back to at least the 17th century, when it was first used in print by an English metaphysical poet named Andrew Marvell. Or Marvel, I don't know, but sounds like.
How many R's and V's in that?
It's 2 L's. It's like the Marvel superhero universe with an extra L at the end.
Okay.
But I wanted to say Marvel, and then I immediately freak out and start thinking I'm gonna hear from somebody that everyone knows it's Marvel. Like,
I think you should go with Marvel, because as we know, our good friend Bill Cannell, whose name really should be pronounced Cannell, and it still bothers me.
Maybe that's what gave me pause, because I was like, I don't think this is necessarily an Allen situation. I think this is that's what it is. It's Bill Cannell. Yeah. So he wrote a poem in 1672 called Transprosed. And there's a line in there that says, 2 or 3 brawny fellows in a corner with mere ink and elbow grease do more harm than 100 systematical divines with their sweaty preaching.
What year was he active?
This was from 1672. I don't have a big bio on him. I'll talk about him a little bit here, but
Well, I was going to say to call back to a previous episode, that he sounds like he would be ready for Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Pantasocracy, his utopian society of poets.
I could see that actually. And this is I will tell you, he was a colleague and friend of John Milton. So okay. Milton's a little more straight-laced, but I mean, he did write Paradise Lost, which is pretty trippy.
It's pretty good.
It's very good.
and just a shout out to STC again. I'm looking at a picture of him, and he doesn't even have an ascot. He has what I believe is called a cravat. So it's like an ascot on steroids, along with a frilly silk shirt. So
I think you should. I know you just jumped on the ascot bandwagon, but cravat Steve might be actually.
Hey, you always have to be thinking forward. I like that.
So, I would have never thought to do this, but after doing so many episodes with you, and you like to go look at authors and what are some other things they've written.
Yeah.
I did do that, and I will say most of them were quite boring, but he did have one that makes me think maybe he'd be part of Pantasocracy.
Please share.
Right? Which is just To His Coy Mistress, which I thought was a little saucy. The rest of them aren't worth bringing up. But anyway, but the point that I'm going to just quickly read this again though, because it's interesting. It's very important to sort of explain how this started, what elbow grease initially was. So he says, 2 or 3 brawny fellows in a corner with mere ink and elbow grease do more harm than 100 systematical divines with their sweaty preaching. So what he's saying there is you can have religious meetings all throughout the country with pastors, preachers preaching whatever they're preaching, but all it takes is some people with pen and ink to get printed material out and they can get right to the people,
right?
And voices can't necessarily shut that down, which is obviously something we know throughout history. The pen is mightier than the sword and all that. So it actually elbow grease started as being used as writing, using, the way he uses it there.
Okay. So pen to paper, not necessarily lugging a wrench out.
Yeah. So back in the 1600s, elbow grease really just meant you're going to get in and write something. But then later in that same century, it did become used as just putting in effort. And it started to be thought of as sweat. Elbow grease is just sweat. So in 1699, a new dictionary of the terms ancient and modern of the canting crew is a dictionary of English. It is a dictionary of English cant and slang by a compiler known only by the initials BE.
BE.
So a lot to unpack there. So the first thing I noticed, and it just bothered me when I first read it, when it said terms ancient and modern of the canting crew. And I'm like, wasn't that the band in the 80s that had that song? That was like the Cutting Crew. But who the hell are the canting crew? I can't remember. What was the Cutting Crew song?
I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight.
And I mean, you have to think about Will Ferrell doing the SNL sketch where he's doing I believe he's in the band or whatever, and they keep breaking into that song. It's, we're trying to listen to the Cutting Crew, but the canting crew. Well, I didn't know what canting meant either. So I said, well, let me look that up. Canting is a cant is jargon or language of a group, often, which is often employed to exclude or mislead people outside the group. Each term differs slightly in meaning, and their use is inconsistent, which this is just now occurring to me. It kind of reminds me of leet speak a little bit. Remember we talked about leet speak back with noob and stuff. So it's sort of like this inside jargon that you really have to be part of that group to understand. That's what a cant is. So the canting crew, a new dictionary. Still don't know exactly who the canting crew is, but in 1699, essentially, elbow grease was just written in the book as a derisory term for sweat.
Okay.
So I do feel like this one took kind of fell down a few pegs. It went from sort of this noble idea of writing being powerful to just sweat.
Well, I could see that, but I could also see too what I like about it is when you say someone's using elbow grease now, you never mean it in a derogatory way. If you're doing something that you need elbow grease, it's basically indicating you need to exert your physical dominance on something and get it done. It's a real, I think it's more of a, I don't see how you can use it in a pejorative way.
That's a great point.
And I'm wearing an ascot and saying that too.
Right. Nobody that's looked like you has ever really put their nose to the grindstone or used elbow grease probably. But yeah, and don't take that the wrong way. It's just the ascot. Although once you see that picture of Alec Baldwin,
yeah,
there may be some elbow grease involved there.
Yeah, definitely.
But in 1889, in a book of Proverbs, it gave it a little bit of a better spin on it, which said, quote, elbow grease makes wealth increase. Not the most creative. That's no Eminem, but it's also, it does put that positive spin on it.
Yeah. And I could see if you're a member of the Canting Crew, that could be one of your raps that you would do.
Yeah, absolutely. The author then elaborates and says that elbow polish or elbow grease is a fine article in a household and beats boar's grease and goose grease into fits. And all that's saying is, hey, look, you don't need some fancy, deer urine or essential oils. Just use elbow grease, So you don't need some sort of concoction, which is a good, frankly, other than you do need essential oils once those come out. But
you do.
But it is a good message for, there's so much stuff you can get. At the end of the day, like just putting a little elbow grease into it is really going to be probably your best bet. So that's it. And that's how we've used it since then. Now, probably the best part of this is the fact that there are a few different other countries that have similar sayings. And I always like this when there's one that's just, it's kind of close to the way that we say it. Sort of like when we said knock on wood. And I think England had touch wood.
Yeah.
It's not totally different, but it's different enough that it's pretty funny.
Hit me.
The Danish equivalent of elbow grease is knuckle fat.
Knuckle fat.
Which
fun to say, fun to think about.
Knuckle fat. It just struck me. It just struck me in a certain way that I thought was pretty good. I've never heard that one. So that leads me to my next one, but we're going to get to that in a minute. First, I believe, Steve, it's time for your entry into New Slang.
Thank you. So, kind of regret that I didn't plan my wardrobe along with the new slang I was going to give, but I do like how you introduced that. I think counting this as a new entry is very fitting. So, my new slang is big energy.
Okay, I've heard this one. Yes.
Yeah, and herein will be referred to keep your editing low as BDE.
Wait, I think that's the guy that wrote that. Oh no, that was just BE. BE wrote the Cutting Crew book, or what is it? Canting Crew.
Canting Crew
was written by BE, Big Energy.
There we go. I mean, it's all oddly coming together there.
Weird how that works. Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about BDE.
Let's talk about this. So this is one I've heard before. When I generally heard it, I liked it. Not to give anything away, but as I went through it, I seemed to like it less. So I'm actually not sure what I'm going to say here at the end. But
okay.
let me give you my thoughts on the roots, or actually not my thoughts. I'm going to give you factual information, starting going to a great resource for things on new slang, knowyourmeme.com. So, according to knowyourmeme.com, BDE is an internet slang term which generally means an understated state of confidence. So I like the way also that Mashable.com puts it as it's a certain type of swagger that people carry. So I like that thought. I could see that something that I hear that kind of makes sense. So let's dig into the origins of it. So this term actually originated on June 8th, 2018, where a Twitter user by the name of I'm Bob Swaggit. Yeah.
Okay.
used it to describe Anthony Bourdain after Anthony Bourdain took his life. So don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I will say that Anthony Bourdain is pretty much the anti-Guy Fieri. God bless him, and I hope he's found his peace.
Yeah.
And I will give another shout out, as I have before, to the comedian Shane Torres for his joke about Guy Fieri, that also he refuses to change after Anthony Bourdain's death, and I appreciate that about him also. So he was describing Anthony Bourdain and made a comment. We're talking about how Anthony Bourdain had BDE, which is what he would have wanted. So I could kind of see, I could be okay with that, even though we're seeing Twitter, we're seeing somebody named Bob Swaggett, we're talking about Anthony Bourdain. These are all kind of things I don't really care for.
Ascot Steve's hackles are up.
Yeah, and even non-Ascot Steve wouldn't really be down with this. So to make it worse, this term really spread in popularity just a few days later, June 22nd, 2018, where Ariana Grande made a comment referring to her boyfriend, Pete Davidson, that, as we are PG, I won't get too much into it, but saying basically that he had BDE, and apparently also the first 2/3 of that too were referenced. So as we've discussed before, and actually you had a clip, I think it was like a 20-minute rant between the two of us one time from an episode about how much we don't like Pete Davidson.
That's what I was about to talk about.
Yeah, so we'll just get it. We'll keep it short, which apparently Pete Davidson doesn't, to his credit. So this is a term that, again, I kind of like it because it's vulgar, but not too vulgar, and it actually kind of makes sense that you could see people with that. And I also like too how it is not contained by gender, that the ladies can have BDE also. Yes. I think so. Another term that came out of this that's kind of like a sister term is horse girl energy. And this is described as the girl that you knew in high school or junior high school that was really into horses, had like a lot of like horse dolls in their room.
Yeah.
Horse posters. And I would say I like where they're trying to go with that, but that's a little bit much. So
it's not, but what, okay. Is that good? Bad? Does it mean they're confident? Does it mean they're weird? What does it mean? They're rich?
I think it's supposed to mean
the equivalent.
The sisters are going to do it for themselves too.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, never mind. I was just going to say, why don't they just use BDE? Because we can use that.
Exactly. We can all use it, but.
So that's sexist. Coming up with something new.
Where is? So we need to be offended about something. So here we go. So BDE, I honestly came down to right this second to figure out if I like it or not. And I'm going to say just by a hair, I like it. And it's really close because I really don't like Pete Davidson. And I don't want to go another 20 minutes for you to have to cut out. But I still think I like it. I just do. I think
that much. Okay.
Yeah, just barely. By a Steve, not by a Pete Davidson.
Man, this has been a roller coaster for me because I was all planning to hate this. And my reasoning was I forgot that we had the conversation about Pete Davidson. I will say that I will put it on the positive side. I would say I like it with just one qualification when it's being said about me. Other than that, I could take it or leave it. I don't know that it's necessary, but if someone is saying that about me, I like it. So I guess that means I like it because it has never been said about me that I know of, but it could happen. Could happen one day. Okay. Well, I've heard, it has sprung up recently.
Yeah.
That was unintentional, but it in the last couple of years, I didn't know it had to do with, I did not know it had to do with Anthony Bourdain. So thank you. And I guess we both are just barely going to be in favor of this one. So that was this week's new slang. All right. So we're going to go to the last one I brought today. And at the end of elbow grease, we talked about how the Danish version of that is knuckle fat.
Knuckle fat.
And then that made me think about the term knuckle down.
Knuckle down.
And I'm just going to, before we get started here, advise anyone listening, do not look that up. Do not look that up in Urban Dictionary. We generally do try to stay away from Urban Dictionary, but then every once in a while that becomes somewhat useful, especially with the new slang. But you're going to want to stay away from Knuckle Down.
It could take the wind out of your BDE if you have your swagger might get deflated a little bit.
Exactly. So also I found 3 bands called Knuckle Down, none of which are worth getting into right now, but you can sort of imagine the kind of band that Knuckle Down would be, right?
Yeah.
So before I get into this one, Steve, is this one that you ever use?
I don't think so. I think I've used ones that are similar to it, like Man Up or Batten Down or, Focus. I don't think Knuckle Down, though, has been one that I've used. Yeah.
Weirdly, I do use this one. And I think that's why I thought of it when I heard Knuckle Fat. And it's when I find myself using, all right, we're going to have to just knuckle down and do it. And I don't know what it means. But it sounds tough. Hence the three bands that probably guys that wear Affliction t-shirts, but which, by the way, have we talked about that? Trust me, there's a reason I'm bringing this up, which we'll get to. Have we talked about Tiger King on the show?
I think we haven't, which I'm stunned because I think every time that we're not talking about the podcast, we're probably talking about it in our personal lives. I mean, you and I are. We're talking about it a lot.
It's bizarre that we haven't talked about it on the show. And the only reason I bring it up, because I mean, it's been talked about. We don't need to talk about Tiger King too much.
Right.
But Steve and I have been on the Joe Exotic thing for a while. Cause I mean, I remember reading articles. I think we were emailing articles back and forth back when it was going on, and then listened to the podcast and then watched the show. But the show did have a character on it, whose name I now forget, but the guy that wore Affliction t-shirts, for real.
Is that the guy that lost both his legs? Did he wear Affliction shirts?
Oh, no. That might've been like the one guy in the show. I kind of liked that guy. He was sort of a likable guy that seemed like he, loved animals, but just got caught up with him. No, I'm talking about, the guy that ended up taking over the zoo.
Oh, that guy. The guy that looks like, I've never been in a vape shop, but that guy's in there.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of really funny memes about that guy. It's like, how do these guys know that they're supposed to be the guys wearing Affliction t-shirts? They do it, and there's no way it's in an ironic way. Right. But anyway, there goes our Affliction sponsorship. But Knuckle Down, I do use it, and it means to get serious about a task, to work diligently on a task or problem. So it's a good one for everyday use. What does it mean? So before I get into what it means, I just want to, I don't know what it is. I get a kick out of, and probably nobody else does, but I get a kick out of the examples they give for when they explain what, an idiom means on websites. And I laugh to myself and I think I'm going to read this on the podcast. So the example from Writing Explained of what knuckle down means, if you need an example, it goes something like this. Daughter, I'm starting to feel stressed about the wedding. Mother, why is that? Daughter, I haven't done any planning yet, and it's coming up in less than 6 months. Mother, in that case, you need to knuckle down and plan the ceremony and reception. Daughter, I know. Mother, I'm serious. Daughter, I will. I'm going to start right now. Mother, you better. The longer you wait, the more stressed you will be. Why do we need that whole little telenovela for Knuckle Down? I think but it did make me laugh. I liked it.
I liked it because I felt like that's probably happened before, with the only exception being the use of the term knuckle down in it.
That's why it's so great. That would not be used. The definition was great, but can you imagine some mother? You've got to knuckle down. Maybe it could happen. We've talked about mom terms in the past. Smart Alec was a key one, but I don't think of knuckle down as one that a mom is saying to her daughter on route to wedding planning. But so this one is very straightforward. And do you know where this comes from by any chance, Steve?
Not remotely.
Okay, because I'll see if you were as surprised as I was. Again, sort of like with Nose to the Grindstone, sometime when I read the answer, I'm like, or I read the origin, I'm like, oh, I bet everyone else knows that, just not me. You know, sometimes there are ones where I'm like, nobody would have ever known that. But once I heard this one, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So back in 1740, there was a dictionary of all words used in English tongue written by Thomas Dyke and William Pardon. In that they define the verb knuckle down as, quote, a particular phrase used by lads at a game called taw, wherein they frequently say, knuckle down to your taw, or fit your hand exactly in the place where your marble lies. So they're talking about marbles there. I don't know if you've ever played marbles, but apparently it was a very popular game back in the day. I know that my mom and dad grew up playing marbles, and to knuckle down means it's time to get down to business, and shoot your shot. So
now that you give the context of marbles, and recently had the chance to reread for the first time in forever The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, where, the many occupations they find when there's children that don't have access to a horizontal screen to stare at all day, to go out and do things, including maybe it's not so good that people are playing with dead cats or faking their own death, but marbles is a component of that. So now you say that too, that makes a lot of sense. I can see that.
Yeah, and it is kind of strange though, because you think knuckle down seems like, put your nose to the grindstone, you put some elbow grease, but it's really about playing. It's some fancy lads playing. I put fancy in there. It's lads playing marbles. It's kind of like, okay, that seems more like just a game, but.
I think anytime you have the term lads and you're staring at a guy wearing an ascot, the word fancy, it would be weird if you didn't say fancy at some point.
Yeah, we found the one tonight that fits best with ascot, Steve. But it got me thinking, and so that's it. That's the straightforward definition of where knuckle down comes from. But it got me thinking about the things that I feel like there was this, time back maybe in the 50s, before that, where the toys were just a little subpar. I mean, I remember going to my grandparents' house and seeing the toys my mom had to play with, and like one of them was a pogo stick, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. Have you ever tried a pogo stick? It's not that fun.
No, especially if you're uncoordinated.
Yeah, so I mean, pogo stick, even if you are kind of coordinated, it's a lot of work. I mean, then you've got jacks. Are you kidding me? You slam your hand on one of those things?
Oh yeah, it's a weapon. But they're probably not allowed to be made now.
Yeah, like the most fun thing was taking a stick and hitting a tire down the street or whatever. But thank goodness now we do have those screens. But so hopefully we will all be getting back to work soon. And now when you hear and you use those phrases, you'll know where they came from. And
you can't see me because this is an audio podcast. However, give a plug for the newest Speakcies podcast, Panic at the Costco, which is a video podcast. And if you watch it, there's a chance you might see a guy with an ascot with some BDE. This is Steve with Origin of Speakcies. Thank you very much for listening to our show today. To keep up with the latest from Speakcies, follow us on social media at Speakcies at Twitter and also at Speakcies on Instagram. This month we have some big announcements involving special guests and also information regarding a brand new Speakcies show. Thank you again for listening to Origin of Speakcies. It was Old Man Clemens the whole time.